Hey there, party people. A little over 2 years ago, I introduced my fanservant concept of Queen Guinevere as a ruler servant. And ever since making that video, I've had Gwyn bouncing around inside my brain. Despite the title, I would love for a story to feature her. Mostly one that revolves around her reconciling with Artoria. Maybe we get some romance between the two. But that is definitely wishful thinking on my part. However, I just don't think that is at all what we would get. Now, she has more or less already appeared within Fate Media more than once. So I think it's only a matter of time before we get a more official design and a story with her. So there's no real stopping her appearance in the future, though I'm sure I will always prefer my design brought to life by the amazing Sabina. Any future story that she will appear in will more than likely be taking place in the past, which is totally fine with me. It's Fate Grand Order specifically where I have most of my issues. And there are a few reasons for that. One of them being something that I actually feel is pretty definitive on why she won't ever be added by the creators. Like, full disclosure, if I had my way, she'd be added in a heartbeat, and I would even be gracious enough to tone down the Yuri a little bit. But let's be real here. I want you to take a moment and really think. How much do you trust them to put Guinevere in a Fate Grand Order, or any Fate story as a servant period, in a way that will be satisfying? Honestly speaking, I do think it's totally possible, however it is unlikely, and I will explain why in a bit. First, let's talk about the most obvious reason they will never add Guinevere into Fate Grand Order. It's because they'd have to use OG Artoria in a story, and they hate doing that. In the early days, it was fine. She'd have minor roles outside of the main story and be on her merry way. But now, God forbid she get a gag or a room dialogue. I know I bring it up every time I talk about Artoria in FGO, and I will continue to bring it up until she has room dialogues for more than just Emiya and Gilgamesh. But ultimately, introducing Guinevere as a servant coming to Chaldea flies in the face of the whole Artoria story is over, there's nothing left to say. You know, that load of crock that they try to sell. Yes, she doesn't need to be the protagonist anymore. She doesn't need to have a major role, but to say that she has no personal stories that can be made into interludes or little side things during events in-game, that's insane! For instance, how does this post-Fate Stay Night and Zero Artoria interact with her knights? Tristan and Lancelot most of all. And since I'm not really counting the first summer event as her having proper interactions with Mordred, as it was a comedy, a serious interaction needs to happen there too. You can't just replace Saber Artoria with her big-tittied versions and act like it's the same. They are different people. Guinevere coming to FGO begs for her to have a major story beat with Artoria. And until Nasu or whoever gets over that idea, there is no way she is coming into the game. But, okay, that's that. What about other stories then? Like, for instance, Guinevere is summoned in some situation and doesn't directly interact with anyone else from her legend outside of flashbacks. Now, that can happen, though this is where my biases come up. It's easy to make her work in a story, overcoming her grief with the help of her master, and it can be very compelling. My main concern is a problem that I notice crops up in fans discussing Guinevere sometimes, and I worry that it'll manifest in official stories of her as well. And that is the idea of servant Guinevere being much too into Lancelot. Look, I get it. It's part of her story. It's a major factor in the fall of Camelot, but that is the exact reason why she shouldn't be super into Lancelot anymore. She still loves him, that part shouldn't change or be taken away, but she spent the rest of her days crying herself to sleep, begging for Artoria's forgiveness. That was written in the Garden of Avalon stories. While I can perfectly imagine that she still has fondness and feelings for Lancelot, I cannot imagine that she'd be fawning for him, because, that should be filling her with the most insane sense of self-loathing, especially when she loved Artoria just as much. It was a terribly complex situation. And to circle back to Fate Grand Order, Lord knows what kind of gags would be put into the game with her. Now, if they split the difference and have her hoarding tons of merch for both Artoria and Lancelot, fine, I'll accept that. Personal biases again, would like it if it was mostly Artoria, but I am concerned that it will just be Lancelot. Which, granted, I will admit, is not entirely fair. Various writers in Fate Grand Order have shown to be better than that, but they have also shown to be just as bad as that, so I still think the fear is at least valid. Overall, while I do think it is possible to create a Guinevere story in Fate property, and have it be done well, I just don't have complete faith that it will be. And therefore, I just don't want to even take the chance. You don't even need to lean into the Yuri, though you should 100% lean into the Yuri. Let Artoria realize that she loves her wife. Yes, the relationship didn't start out that way. It was a political marriage, but new perspectives can change that. In Hollow Extaria, she recounted her wedding with fondness, wishing nothing but happiness for Guinevere. It's not hard for that to evolve into genuine love, you cowards. Give me my tragedy to fluff romance. And again, that is bias speaking. You do not need to add that, but you should. Anyway, be that as it may, I should probably come up with something myself after all the fretting I've done this video. Give an example of a story I would like at the very least after discussing what I don't want. I mean, I technically did already. I came up with a Santa Guinevere concept and made a video going over that. But I think you all deserve something a little more substantial. So, here's a little story excerpt that I came up with. It's meant to be a climactic moment as Guinevere is faced with some big bad in a Holy Grail war. I originally posted it on AO3, and it's honestly not much, but I hope that you will enjoy it, as it is read by the amazing ApaniVA.
The Queen of Camelot is an unassuming servant, seeming almost out of place in a Holy Grail war. Though she is a ruler, so it makes sense to a point. She is an arbiter, not a fighter. She is meant to remain outside of combat, unless to enforce the rules of the ritual. So normally she stands by, as she has before, to watch warriors and knights do battle. Alone as always, she stands tall and beautiful, kindness in her smile and sorrow in her eyes. Hair like silver starlight glimmers and twinkles, catching the eyes and admiration of those around her. But now she stands in opposition to danger. She is meant to be the perfect queen, an ideal. It's what she has to be. But she never once knew what that was. Was it only a woman who stood behind her king, to be supportive and beautiful to behold? Or was she supposed to be at her king's side, sharing in the burdens that were rested atop their fair head? Guinevere didn't know the answer, and she wasn't sure she could do either. She never understood her king and what was needed of her. She loved the ideal of the King of Knights, but did she ever love the person behind that title? How many tears she shed lamenting over that question. Now was not the time for tears, however. The threat was looming, and she knew her powers, even as a servant, could not hold it at bay forever. It was a simple ability, to summon forth her fateful knight. But who would that be? Would her call even be answered? That's what she feared. The guilt in her heart was like a heavy stone, making her believe that she didn't deserve to have her call answered. In her mind, she was the cause of ruin and death. She was too weak to be the ideal queen, and she fell in love with that man, brought him down to madness, caused the fall of Camelot, and the death of her beloved king. From that night until her death, and even to this day, she dreams of being forgiven. An impossible wish that not even a holy grail could grant. But right now, she has to face her fears. She must try, or else all will be brought to ruin once again.
Please, come to me, my knight!
Before her, a flash of light comes and pushes away the dark, and there stands a dazzling figure of blue and silver. Alone as always, she stands resolute and strong, gentleness in her face, and ferocity in her eyes. Hair like golden sunlight shines, catching the eyes and awe of the woman behind her.
My king,
Guinevere said with a trembling voice, tears streaking down her cheeks.
You've come.
The King of Knights turned to her and gave her a kind smile she had not seen before. A gloved hand touched her cheek, wiping away a tear.
I'm sorry I did not come sooner. I hope you can forgive me, my queen, though I may not deserve it.
With that, Guinevere openly began to weep, embracing her beloved king, her knight, her Artoria.